Hey everyone, today I'm joined by Ethnic Smoke, also known as Pankaj. You would know him from casting many Flesh and Blood tournaments that you have watched on coverage, but when he's not casting, he is also a terror in the local scene. So today we're joined Battle Hardened winner and PTI finalist, right? Second place? Second
Yep.
place.
Yep.
With New, a hero that has been somewhat discussed, but has not really been talked about as being one of the top tier heroes for the format, at least in the conversation of things like Zen. Has seen maybe as a bit of an underdog for the format. I don't know how you would feel about that, if that's correct or not.
Oh no, she's definitely not S tier. I mean, to be honest, the deck just sucks. It's bad. It's bad hero.
Yeah.
Okay, not quite. No, but I think she's decent into the expected winners metagame, right? Like I think that's a very good matchup in the Zen, particularly, and that's kind of like the boogeyman. So I feel like if you have good game into Zen, then you're in a good spot. And also, particularly because Zen is so relevant, that means one of my worst matchups, which is Enigma, is not very represented. So So that's kind of why I chose New. It's like she feels strong into what I expect the metagame to be.
For sure. I definitely think people are excited to see a winning deck list now for this hero. It's been somewhat underexplored, and I think people are excited to really get going into it. So first of all, how did the tournament go? We know that you won and got second place. Is there anything you want to go through in terms of matchups throughout the day?
Yeah, let me just pull up, I guess, all the matches I faced. I have it somewhere. Okay, there we go. Yeah, so day one, I mean, I guess each event is just one day. So Battle Hardened, the Swiss rounds. First round was Riptide. Riptide can be tough. It depends on what version they're on. If they're on the mid-rangey version with like lots of traps, I think we lose that every time. At least my version of New loses against that. But most Riptides these days are the aggro version. So the aggro version is on fewer traps, and it's still difficult, but it's a lot more winnable. And the way I play that matchup is I basically just don't respect any traps. Every now and then I get blown out by a tar pit trap, but if I keep playing around it, I'll just lose. So you just send it, and sometimes they don't have it, right? Because it's so few copies in the deck. That a lot of times you just get there, and I managed to get there. And of course, Command and Conquer, obviously, massive house in the matchup. After round two was Kayo. Kayo, I would say I'm slightly unfavored into. But there's a key moment in this game where they, if they didn't play around my arousing wave that was on board, and I knew they had Blood Rush in Arsenal because, I mean, the way New works is there's just so much information. I typically know like what's in your hand or what's in your art, what's been sitting in Arsenal for a while. So I just popped the arousing wave on the sensor, and I called Blood Rush. So that Blood Rush got stuck there for that turn, and then after that, I managed to blow it up with a Command and Conquer or something like that. So I would say that was a key pivotal moment in that matchup. What was after that? Then round 3 and 4 was Zen's. I mean, it's Zen, so it's like as long as I see a couple of Sirens calls and a couple of Codexes, that matchup should be pretty good, and that's the way it was. Round 5 was Victor. Victor is, I mean, my best matchup. Well, I guess not Victor specifically. Guardian is my best matchup, and Victor's the only Guardians being played right now. So my best matchup, this one it went really, really well. I think I won the game at like 20 live, and I was about to overkill them by like 10. Round 6 was Dory, Dorinthia. This is actually Nixie. Shout out Nixie, by the way. This is awesome. This is a really, really good game. Dory is similar to Riptide, where it kind of depends what sort of version they're on. If they're on hatchets, I lose every time. At least, once again, this version of New will lose every time. The thing about New is that so many different ways to build her, and Assassin can sort of target different things as they would like. So it is a build of New that can probably do fine into Hatchet Story. This one isn't it. Luckily, Nixie was on Dawnblade, and that's a lot better for me because Dawnblade, unlike Hatchets, is more vulnerable to disruption. You know, if I bring Hatchets down to 2 cards, I still get to do their 2-card 9. Whereas Dawnblade, if they swing Dawnblade and just have 1 card remaining, that's not very scary. I can totally deal with that. This game technically did end up going to time, but he did concede to me and then because I was pretty far ahead. I had full tempo. He had no more armor. He was at 3 life, and I'm at 7, and I'm coming at him with my 4-card hand when time was called. Also, I had a blue shunt in his banner zone that I put there with a pass over. So he's at 3, but technically he's at 2 because the only way he's dealing damage with is with Dawnblade. And we were at second cycle, so I'm coming back on Chi, so I can almost only just pitch to New on his turn, play his shunt, and deal him 1 damage. So he ended up conceding to me, which was very nice of him. But yeah, it was looking like it was gonna go my way if we play it out. Round 7 and 8 were my losses for the day. Well, round 7 was against an Enigma. We didn't actually get to play the game.
Yeah.
We got deck checked, and one of my sleeves had a little scuff on it, and the judge ruled that I could have gained a significant advantage and then gave me a match loss for that. So we didn't get to play into the Enigma. I mean, I probably would have lost anyway, but still, losing to a deck check was not ideal. And then round 8 which was the last round of Swiss. At this point, I was locked already. This was against Zen, a local, actually. And I made a key misplay in this game. I attacked with a misblade on the turn, where I actually should have attacked with my Scale Peeler. And that is pretty much what lost me the game. If I attack with Scale Peeler there, after he can't just fridge block my Sensor that came after that, and he doesn't get to pop off on me. So that loss was basically, it was just on me. I swung the wrong dagger. I tunneled on the go again, and I kind of already had a different way to give it go again, so that was misplay on my end. But made top 8 anyway. Quarterfinals was against another Zen. Well, Zen again, it's actually the same player who I just lost to in round 8. And this time we didn't misplay. We sent the correct dagger at the correct time and managed to get there. Semifinals was a new mirror. This was super grindy. It was like a 90-minute game. It came down to both of us holding 2 or 3 chi with only 2 cards left in deck, and then he died to my dagger, and I activate New to play a 1 power from his banish, and he was holding 2 chi, so he couldn't block it.
That's sick.
And then finals was a Zen, and this one went about how Zen game is supposed to go for me, where I'm just keeping them locked down, not letting them have a full card, not letting them have 5-card hands, not letting them use their fridge effectively because of Scale Peeler. And then yeah, we just get there.
All right. Anything from the second day with the PTI event that's worth like noting, or is it pretty much like same meta, same experience?
Yeah, pretty much same, I guess. So this one I'll just go through the heroes I faced and I'll go through into detail what exactly happened. So round 1 Victor, same Victor as yesterday, managed to get there. Then Riptide, different Riptide than the previous day, but same aggro build, which I think Riptides have to be in the aggro build these days, if you're worried about Enigma and stuff. So aggro build, same philosophy, same strategy, managed to get there. Azalea's, I think, tougher than Riptide. I currently, I would say the matchup was like a 50-50. But yeah, we managed to find the disruptor. I managed to get there. Round 4 was my only loss on the Swiss on this day. It was against a Dory. This time it was a Hatchet's Dory. So like I said, just Hatchet's Dory means my list basically can never be the Hatchet's Dory. Round 5 Zen, round 6 New, round 7 Zen again. The round 7 Zen was the same player as the finals of the Battle Hardened on the previous day. So there's a bit of an advantage there because I know their blocking preferences. For example, I know that he's never going to block my misplay, like no matter what. So I can use that to my advantage, which I did. Quarterfinals was a new mirror. Semifinals was Zen. This one was Brody Spurlock, actually. It was a really good game, but I think he told me afterwards he didn't have as much experience in a new matchup as he would have liked. I believe that was his 4th game into new. And some of the decisions, I was like, I could tell that. For example, the Bonds of Agony I sent like kind of just in the second last turn of the game. He was holding 2 of the same card. And he, and it was clear I could make it live because I still had equipment up. So I made it live and I just took 2 of the Harmonies of the Hunt that was in his hand. And afterwards, he's like, yeah, I definitely should have blocked one of them because he forgot Bonds of Agony can take 2 of the same card that's in your hand. And then finals was the Zen, and this one was this one I lost, and we can get more into that later as we talk about the deck. But I think my opponent played exceptionally well. Part of it was also I did not see my power cards. What I found with the Zen matchup is that out of the 3 codexes and the 3 Sirens calls, I need to see at least 2 of them within the first 5 or 6 turns for me to be comfortable. If I see 1 of them, then we kind of have a game. But if I see like 2 of them within by turn 6, then I'm feeling quite comfortable in the matchup. I didn't see any of them. They were all at the bottom. But also, I think my opponent had a very, very good plan into new. Not something I'd seen many other Zens do. So that was also that. I think that was basically the bigger reason. I think even if I saw maybe a Siren's Call in those first few turns, because of the way my opponent was playing and their game plan and the cards they had in their deck, they were, it was their game to win, and they did. Yeah. So I'm going to start with the ratios, I guess.
Okay.
So let me. Right. So the way I like to do it is I like to think of the matchups I want to prepare for. And I want to make sure that the 60 that I'm bringing in to his matchups makes sense to me. And part of the things that needs to make sense is the blue ratio And for Nu, especially, is the number of attacks that you're running, because we run so many of these attack reactions and these transcend cards and stuff that you don't want to have too few attacks and you just brick by drawing too many non-attacks, right? So blue ratio, what I want to be is at 30 blues in every configuration of 60. I found 30 blues to be the correct number. It means I can transcend often enough, I can swing daggers often enough, which Beckoning Misplay is a heck of a card, which I do want to send pretty often. And also I can just pitch to, there's cards like Hiss and Venomous Bites, which care about blue being pitched, right? So 30 blues is what I want to be at. And as for attacks, I want to be no fewer than 36 attacks into every single configuration of 60 that I can make. No fewer than 36. And also keep in mind, at least 3 of the non-attacks are codexes most of the time, except in Kano. We'll get to that. So 36 attacks and 3 of those non-attacks are codexes. So it's kind of like a pseudo 39. That's a ratio I'm aiming for in every matchup configuration, and that's kind of when we go over like sideboarding, that's kind of the baseline that I'm trying to go for.
Okay. Would you want to go over sideboarding right now?
I guess maybe not right now. I guess maybe when we get to questions.
Sure.
We probably don't need to go through every single matchup.
You got it.
We'll just.
Are there any key cards here that you want to point out specifically that you feel like are not typically talked about for new lists?
Yeah, Sensa. Sensa in particular. I mean, especially when the main deck I'm trying to target is Zen. Sensa is absolutely incredible. Also, just because of the amount of knowledge that Nu just gets from our opponent, right? As Siren's Call is looking at the hand, stuff like Surgical Extraction and Persuasive Prognosis, I also get to look at the hand. Stuff like that means it's very easy. There's so many points throughout all my games where I know what's in my opponent's arsenal, or I directly know what's in the hand. That sensor is just absolutely incredible. And also, against Zen in particular, the blind sensor is also just really good, because, especially on like the mono bonds list, they're running like 9 Descendants and 9 bonds. You just name Descendant Gustwave, and whatever the turn is not going to be very threatening. Into the more like sort of hybrid lists that are running Chase the Tail and running the bonds package, that gets a little more tough. That you need to hope that you have some other information somewhere, or you just guess. But you are 50-50 to hit, like whether to try and go for the bonds line or whether to try and go for like the Tiger line. So you can look at the graveyard. You've seen like way more bonds and Descendants. You've seen like one Chase the Tail. You just call Crouching Tiger. If not, you call a Descendant Gustwave, and it just works perfectly with the cost curve or Scale Peeler into Sensor. I just pitch 1 blue to do that, and then I guess Scale Peeler is something else we should talk about. Zen's Fridge blocks 7, but once it gets hit by Scale Peeler, it blocks 3, which is a huge downgrade. It means that no matter what you do, you send a Sensor, you send a CNC or Leave No Witnesses, there's no way they can just Fridge block and stop the on hit, which means you're always taking a card from them, and that's one of the key ways that you can sort of curb their aggression to have your on hits hit, or to force more cards of them to block the on hits.
What did you think of the weakest link?
Weakest link it's all right. It was a pretty late addition to the list, particularly because Kayo was more tough than I thought it would be. Especially the list nowadays, which also, the teching for Enigma, so they have like more wild rides. And the way you beat Nu is by just being efficient on smaller hands. And I was finding I was losing to KOs, but I can take 2 cards from them, but with 3 remaining cards, they just go wild ride into Claw into another 2 cost, and that is just, the numbers is way too good for Nu to deal with. And that's even after I've disrupted a couple of cards from them. So weakest link was there for that, and also, is disruption to Zen, because they are on 9 Transcends and 3 Aurivores. So a lot of times it's potentially going to hit them. So it's fine. It's all right. It's not my go-to. I'm not like, oh, I draw this, and I'm like, heck yeah, I want to like resolve this every time. It's just, if I have the tempo and I have the space, and this is kind of the only disruption I have, then I do send this. It's better than, I guess, it was the best thing I could find to be in the slot, to just have the added disruption to KO and Zen.
I have another question about the list, because I feel like someone who's watching this, who's looked at other lists before, is going to have this thought. Why are you not running the Sacred Art?
It is incredibly clunky. It is just the cost 3 on it, and the fact that you have to play the blue, and you need an action point, right? Because, okay, so when you... Okay, the Sacred Art is banishing to... you have a targeted banish, so you really want to be activating Nu. when you do that. So it's only coming in matchups where they have blues that you can play, right? So that's like Brute, Guardian, stuff like that. The blues that you want to play. Now, in those matchups, I really don't want to be using Slithers on my own cards. I want to be using it on their cards. So the Sacred Art means I need to have played a blue. I need to still have the action point after I play that blue, so that the Slither I make from the Sacred Art can be used on one of their cards. And also I need to have another blue to pitch to the Sacred Art in the first place. It was just incredibly clunky. The best part about it is just that it targets 2 cards in the graveyard for me to banish. But I find that I don't really need it. There's enough incidental banishes, and they have stuff like Guardians and Brutes have enough good blues, and actually even in the mirror, there's enough good blues that you just incidentally hit that I didn't need it, and it was just clunking up my hand.
Makes sense. How did you feel about the ratio of Transcend cards?
So 5 Transcends, it felt right. It felt good. I mean, the difference between 5 and 6, honestly, most of the time is too marginal anyway, for me to be like, oh, it was a significant difference. But I think the lack of the Sacred Art definitely felt good, because so many times that card's just awkward. And especially when you draw Sacred Art with another Transcend card, you're like, this is so incredibly awkward. It's just double Transcends, you can like just Transcend, play both of them and go ahead and Transcend off of them, but you can't really do that as Sacred Art unless you have another blue, and that's like, it's just so much of an ask. So if people feel like they want the 6 Transcend, I would add something like a Stir the Pot or Preserve Tradition before I add the Sacred Art in. And I could see the argument for it, but I was pretty happy at 5. Yeah, I mean, sometimes, when I want to, sometimes I do want to block, and just having the option with 5 is nice. Also, it did come up in the mirror, especially on the mirror I played on the second day in the PTI quarterfinals, when my opponent was on like the 7 Chi new list. And when we got to the end game, which you do in a matchup a lot, you'll get to second, third cycle. I found that a person that has more Chi in the deck loses because you can't block, right? So yeah.
So if you're only running that many Chi cards, I guess the follow-up question would be, how often or when do you actually activate the hero versus just using Mask?
Yeah, so I think we joked earlier that Nu sucks. Is a bad hero. Part of that, well, I guess part of why I make the joke is because she doesn't have a hero ability. I feel like half my games, the text on my hero is blank, or it just says the opposing Mystic hero couldn't play Levels of Enlightenment. Like, that's kind of all that it says. Let's see, like the matchups I activated in over the weekend. Well, the Victor that I played twice. Yeah, I activated there. It was awesome there. The Kayo, the Kayo, we activated against Kayo. And I guess my game against Brody, I was about to activate it, but he was very cheeky and he didn't want to give me the satisfaction. So I used Grains of Tips of Scale on my attack to kill him before I could kill him with his own Harmony of the Hunt. So, that was brutal. But I guess so technically I would count that as it was my killing blow. And I guess, I mean, if we count the Nixie game where, the blue shunt would have been relevant. So I guess, I don't know, maybe like there was like 4 or 5 matchups over how many games it was that? 20 games, 21 games, where the hero ability was relevant. So not as much as you think. But in the matchups where it is relevant, like Guardian and Brute, it is obviously very, very relevant.
Do you ever see people playing around the hero differently because of the existence of the text box? And do you ever think that's like incorrect, or?
So the biggest thing is they side out levels, right? Like the Zens should side out levels. The Enigmas should side out levels, and I think that's definitely correct. Even if I get 1 levels in the banish, it is absolutely massive. Because, the turn will, typically I'll start with like a dagger or some other attack, like say a surgical or something. And then when I activate Nu, that's my second blue in my pitch zone already. So even if I steal your levels with 2 modes, that's 0 for 5 go again, or 3 go again, draw a card, that's already very, very massive. So I would say that's the main thing. That's the main difference I see. Where people are like playing around the hero ability. I mean, like Victors can't really. I mean, I guess I don't know. Maybe they're siding out their Terra Sunders. I don't even know if Victors really run Terra Sunders anymore. But yeah, they can't really help it, right? They're going to have big blue attacks and will love to steal. Same with KO. So you can't really play around that. But the Mystics are signing out levels, and that's kind of the most I see that they're doing, and I think that is correct.
Okay, so just like
I think signing out levels has to be. Yeah, you have to sign on levels. It's too much of a risk, especially if at some point if I send a Bonds of Agony at you and you're holding a levels, it's just like you can block the Bonds with levels, but then I'll banish it with Nu. Like it'll just get banished and they have levels, and if it hits when you're holding a levels, you just lose the game on the spot. So
After the two events in the weekend, are there any cards that you would cut from the list?
Yeah, so that's a tough question because I guess the way Assassin works is that it's not okay. I guess overall, I was pretty happy with this list. I was happy with this AT that I brought in for this event, but that's kind of the way I feel like Assassin works. Where it's I need to see how the meta changes before I think about what cards I want in. Now, there's a whole. If you, I think we scroll down to the maybe board, you're gonna see like 100 cards.
You
Like
love the maybe boards.
I do love the maybe
We got
board.
a lot.
Some of these were definitely stuff I was just like trying on for a bit. I'm like, actually, some of these I could probably cut a bunch of these. Like, I don't think I'm ever playing Gorgon's Gaze, and definitely
Are
not.
we ever
three.
playing second tentative Chi Tide?
So I was, maybe not Tide, but Wind was something I was considering, for a while, especially against Enigma. But then it has the really bad problem where it's terrible in the mirror, right? It's like almost as bad as levels in the mirror. So it becomes more blues I can't play in the mirror. So, when we spoke about the ratios earlier, like 30 blues is what I want in every matchup. The mirror is the exception because I can't bring levels and I don't have enough blues in my sideboard. So I'm actually at 28 blues in the mirror. So if I cut, I don't know, if I cut something else to add second turn of Chi Wind, I need to cut. I didn't go down from 28 blues to even less in the mirror, and that's a big problem. So, and that's kind of where the whole I need to see how the meta changes it comes into it. I currently have 3 blue pick to pieces, but Enigma's representation is going down and down like every week as we speak. So at that point, can I cut the pick to pieces to maybe bring in blue Bonds of Attraction, which I think is better in the mirror? Because one thing that's very powerful in the mirror is targeted targeted banishes in the graveyard. You passed it. It's a little above.
Where is it?
Yeah, because it's in a pile with the reds and the blues. It's next to a Death Touch. No, Bonds of Attraction.
Oh, I see.
Next to
this one. Got it.
Yeah. So the biggest thing about this is targeted banish in the graveyard, right? Which, like I said, into Roots and Guardians, I don't think I need it. They can't help, but this can't help it. I'll get some good blues in there. Like Kayo has 6 of the Wind-Ups and Smash Instincts, and some others I'm probably forgetting about that I could totally play. Invicta is well full of them. So I don't need it there, but in the mirror, this was played against me, and I was like, wait, this is really strong because of the targeted banish in my own graveyard, because I can be careful about like not blocking with surgicals or whatever. But I do want to send on the stealth attacks, but I do want to send surgicals. It's a very powerful card in the mirror. So it ends up in the graveyard, and then this is the way they can get it out and put it into my banish. So, if I think Enigma's representation goes down and news goes up, I would see cutting picture pieces for this. Would I have done it for this past weekend? No, because I think Enigma's representation was still high enough that I had to respect it. So, to answer the question of would I cut anything or would I change anything? I don't have much in the way of a card underperformed or overperformed. I guess Sensor overperformed. I definitely want to keep that in. But I don't have much in the way of this really underperformed. But I could totally see things that I would change depending on how the meta evolves.
Okay. Let's see. I guess jumping in.
Yeah, and I guess just add, sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say, I guess jumping into more gameplay for the deck. What do you typically arsenal in new?
As much as possible, not the reactions. So basically, try and arsenal stuff that has the fewest conditions for you to get it out of there. So any disruptive piece, CNCs, Ascenses, Leave No Misses, Surgicals, Prognosises, all those are very, very Codexes, all those are amazing arsenal targets. Transcend cards, I would say, are the next best arsenal targets. It's sure, it's you don't want to get it out of there unless you play the blue, but a lot of times you'll be able to manufacture a turn when you play a blue, and then it's easy to get out of there and activate Mask. And then lower than that would be the Venomous Bites and the Hisses and the Justinics, because there's enough times where I drew a generic disruptive piece like CNC. They obviously can't Hiss a Venomous Bite or Justinic, and then my arsenal's just kind of stuck. Or I draw a Codex and my arsenal's stuck because there's a reactant that I can't get out. So yeah, in terms of arsenal priority, that's the way I'd go about it. But of course, there's enough times where you draw randomly off a Ponder or off a Siren's Call, and then you're forced to arsenal Justinic and Hiss. I still definitely would just go ahead and arsenal. I'm going to IP. But just be mindful that that can be pretty risky. And the times where I do arsenal the Bites or the Hisses or the Justinics is when I'm fairly confident that I'm going to see a hit at least within the next 2 turns. Just aware of what you've seen in your deck and when you haven't. Or it's a bit of an act of desperation where I'm I need to be able to find a target for this, and that's my way back in. Yeah.
If someone were looking to pick up this deck, how would you, I guess, in the most brief way possible, tell them how to play it?
It's very dependent on who you're against, right? Once again, it's all assassin shtick. So against Zen, for example, the way you want to play is to make them not play. That's the ideal way. I mean, obviously, there's a lot more nuance into that. But that's kind of your overall goal, is to keep them on small hands as much as possible. And that is the way I play it. I aggressively take damage in the matchup to keep them on small hands. Because ultimately, one of my cards, if I like say pitch to activate Mask, I'm trading one of my cards for one of their cards, and in that matchup, I believe I'm winning that exchange, because when they like the way the damage works is very like, exponential, right? They have like 4 or 5 cards. That 5th card is adding so much more damage than like one of my cards is. So if I get to just keep them smaller, I definitely take that exchange. But against something like a Guardian, I wouldn't do that. Against something like Guardian, you have to play a lot more patient, and your game plan is more just set up their good banish zone, and after pop off and play 3 of their attacks in a row. So it's very very matchup dependent. There's also a lot of, it's like when you're running cards like Sensor, there's a lot of knowing your opponent's deck and like knowing the sort of cards that they would like to run, and keeping track of what you have seen. For example, like against Azalea, for example, I'm like, oh, I haven't seen them pitch a Codex yet, I haven't seen them play one yet. Then the Sensor hits, and I call Codex, and the next turn I see them pitch a Codex to a Death Deal. I'm like, awesome. There's stuff like that you need to kind of keep track of. Again, it all changes who you're against. I don't think I have a one size fits all for how to play it. Although I will say one thing, which is don't tunnel on Bonds of Agony. I think that's one mistake I see a lot of people make, where they draw bonds and they're like, oh, we gotta go, we gotta turn this on. And what I'll say is that if you have to give up basically most of your equipment to turn this on, then you shouldn't be playing this card. Like, then this does not fit in that turn cycle. You should be either pitching or blocking with it. Arsenal this is also one of those sort of risky Arsenal targets for the exact same reason. I don't want to commit most of my equipment to be able to turn this on. When you see me play this, it's typically because I have minimum 2 reacts, like a card, or like, a hiss that is 2 reacts in one. And then maybe I can give up like Blackteks on top of that. Like, that's okay. But I don't want to be giving up Blackteks and arms for this like early in the game. Like, that's just, the word of caution I give is don't tunnel on this card.
Okay. So besides maybe overcommitting to bonds, are there any other mistakes you think people would make pretty easily when they first pick up this deck that they could avoid?
Yeah, so I guess again, this is more like my version of it and the way I play it. I think I see a lot of news blocking too much into aggro matchups. So into something like Zen. The way I play it, like Zen, Azalea, Ninja, all these things. The way I play it is, it sounds really weird, and to be honest, to some extent, it's very hyperbolic. But the way I like to phrase it is that I am the beatdown. So because the more cards I can take from them, like the more I'm winning, right? Because like a deck like Zen, a deck like a lot of ninjas, the way they work is that once you reduce them down to like 2 cards, they're actually so obscenely underrated. It's just not good, right? So like so many times I bring the Zen down to 2 cards in their turn is like Kakara into, I don't know, like a blue 100 wins or something. Or just Kakara and Arsenal, right? So I'm trying to get my opponent into that state as much as possible. And I can't do that if I'm giving most of my cards on blocking. And that's for 2 reasons. One reason is that I need more cards. I don't activate Mask and stuff. I don't play my hisses and stuff. I need more cards to do it. And the other reason is the threat that you're presenting. If I send Surgical and I have no cards in hand, it's so much of an easier block. And whenever I just send Surgical, 1 floating, I have just 1 card in hand. That 1 card means that my range is so incredibly high that it means that they'll usually just let the Surgical hit and don't bother trying to block it. Which means I dealt 4 and got card selection out of their hand to pick what is their best card in the hand to get it out of there. So that's like, it's hard to quantify how much value that is, but it is a lot. And it rests on me holding the 1 extra card. And a lot of times that card isn't even a reaction I'm playing the Surgical. It's like a Sensor that I want to Arsenal for the following turn. But I'm just holding it and didn't block with it, which means they have to let my Surgical hit, because they can't play around Venomous Bite. They can't play around sending and activating Mask, and they can't play around a hiss into something. They can't play around me giving it around, like pumping it by 1 by Arousing Wave and then Blackteks into Codex or something. Like, they can't play around all those possibilities just because I'm holding that 1 card. So that's so don't block too much when you're in those kind of matchups. The way I play it is I will aggressively take damage to keep cards to threaten stuff and rip cards from them. And in a sense, like I'm the beatdown. Like it's a bit hyperbolic, but yeah, that's the way.
Someone did ask, do you ever bluff with this deck?
Yes, a lot. I think the one that stands out to me the most was against Brody. So I went for a line. I blocked a 1 card on his turn. I think the previous turn cycle I had disrupted him enough, so I was given 1/3 block. Again, like I said, I probably could have blocked more, but I want to keep threatening stuff, right? So I'm holding 3 cards and I have 1 card in Arsenal. I pitched a blue to Scale Peeler, and I went for Leave No Witnesses. And so I have 1 floating, 1 card in hand, and 1 card in Arsenal, which means he cannot block this. So he's all gotten Scale Peeled, which means his fridge blocks 3 now. Oh yeah, he was in Zen. So his fridge blocks 3 now. So if he wants to block this, he still needs to give me 2 cards or 1 card plus the fridge. So plus armor. And then he would get blown out if I have the react, which I'm totally representing. So he says no blocks, as most Zens do. And then I Blackteks it and I censor from hand, and my Arsenal's a Codex. I didn't have to react at all. But that's just, you can't block new when I have 1 float. I have 1 float and 2 cards remaining. There's no way you can block it, and if you do, you could just get blown out if they do have the react. So you have to recognize that when you're playing the deck as well. Recognize that it's not just about what you have, it's about what your opponent has to think you might have, and you just get value that way as well.
A couple leading questions. What heroes are you most excited to see? So when you flip heroes, like which ones are you like hoping they are?
Well, Guardian like times 500, like any of the Guardians. So obviously, I mean, we say Guardian this meta, Victor's the only playable one. So in terms of okay, we can actually expect to see this. Victor easily. Just yeah, that matchup is the easiest matchup that I think we have. If you just play patiently and you don't get too greedy, you will just fill up the banish. And then with your equipment suite itself, you don't even need too much. Just with the equipment suite, you get to play 2 to 3 of the attacks, which is just incredible, right? So because the equipment suite is Stilettos with Flick Knives. So again, you have to be patient. You don't use the Stilettos on anything random throughout the course of the game. You just save it for when you transcend. You play the first attack, you Stilettos it, and you also Flick Knives. So then now the next thing you play from the thing has Go again, because the Flick Knives blue dagger hit. Like you flick the Mistblade. The next thing you play from that thing gets Go again, and then after you play another attack of that thing, and that's like just 3 blue attacks. You will set up the banish just naturally over the course of the game. It's you just get that, unless they really super high roll you with a whole like back-to-back CNC pummels in the first few turns of the game. It's just it's a fairly straightforward matchup, I would say.
Are there any others?
After Victor, I'd say it'd be Zen. Because I mean, there's enough disruption in this deck, like between the weakest links, between the senses, and obviously the natural disruption that Assassin has, like Leave No Witnesses, and Surgicals on top of the added disruption that New has, like Siren's Calls and the Mask. I found that a lot of times you can just keep them on those small hands. And they also a deck that blocks terribly. And especially with the inclusion of Scale Peeler, they can't even depend on their 7 block fridge to block all the disruptive things that they're doing. That, you just in terms of like draw sequences, I feel like just my average draw sequence should beat them most of the time. I don't even and that's what you want. I mean, it's a favorite matchup, so yeah, average draw sequence should beat them. I need to get unlucky, and they need to get lucky for them to win.
Are there any heroes that you don't want to see?
Yeah, Kano. Kano's at the top of the list. I guess this is weird. It's weird. So Kano and Enigma are at the top of the list. It's weird. Which one will be higher depends on the skill level of the opponent. If we're talking like top tier, like this is super high level play, then I'd rather see Enigma than Kano. If you're talking like some mid tier level play, then I'd rather see Kano than Enigma.
And is that just because of the Kano being able to restack if you mess with the pitch stack at all?
It's because the high level Kanos know that they just have all the agency and they don't need to commit to stacking or commit to tempo, and they can just see what I'm doing. And just the way my deck works, I need to do a lot to present like the disruption. And they can either like so for example, I go surgical and then they say no blocks, and then I like pump it up and I give it Go again. And then they're like, okay, they know it's about to hit, and they just empty the hand with Kano. And the best Kanos will be able to just like do like pull something out of the cards they hit off of Kano and dodge disruption, and then I'm just dying. because I've also committed a lot on this offense that I can't really defend myself as well with Arcane Barrier. So the good Kanos just know how to navigate around the disruption, and they know how to stack, so I kind of need to be worried about them stacking. At the same time, trying to disrupt as much as possible so they can't like tempo me too much. But the good Kanos have all the agency and have like they have the windows of response, which is flipped, right? Like normally because I'm playing attack reaction speed, most people need to decide their blocks, and then I get to go one above them because I'm playing at reaction speed. Kano is like they get to go one above me because I'm playing instant speed. And I just like respond to my reactions and just empty the hand, they dodge my disruption. And they're just dealing me damage in the meantime. And then the mid-tier Kanos will commit to one of those plans, and they'll and then I'll know what they're doing. Because if clearly they're stacking, I'm stacking. And if they're not stacking, then I do have 2 Oases in the list. So, I can park one. And kind of the mid-level Kanos aren't amazing at sort of playing around Oasis. Or, yeah, they're not great about playing around Oasis. So then that hopefully just gets there. And they're also not great at stacking either. Right, like so many times, you play on Tarsha or whatever, like so many Kanos just undo. They're like, oh wait, no, I was like one off my stack or whatever. Or they even mess up the stack in paper. Even the really good Kanos do this sometimes. They just mess up the stack in paper. So the mid-level Kanos, like I'd rather face them than mid-level Enigmas, but it does switch once it goes to high-level play.
Okay.
So, were you gonna ask questions?
Oh yeah. People, I got some questions specifically like how many cards you keep into Zen, how aggressive you play. It sounds like you already answered some of that, but like, do you treat the matchup differently pre-transcend versus post-transcend when they have traverse up?
100%. There's definitely times where they haven't transcended, then I'm happy just in a CNC. They have transcended, and I'll never do that. I'll never just send CNC if they have transcended, because then they can just fridge block 7, which also plays around Arousing Wave. And just combo off of me with 6-card hand. So yeah, pre-transcend and post-transcend is quite different. So pre-transcend, you can sort of block a little more, and just I guess be a little more efficient, I guess would be a term. But you're still disrupting them. Still definitely prioritize disruption. You can do that. But once it's post-transcend, you have to make sure that every turn cycle, like when you are deciding your blocks and what they're doing, you have to make sure that what you're presenting, you have an answer for if they fridge block 7. Sometimes the answer is as simple as I'm going to start my turn with Scale Peeler. So in that CNC line, for example, if I have Tunic up, it's just Scale Peeler, Tunic, CNC. Whereas if it was pre-transcend, I might save my Tunic. I would just like CNC, and it's fine. I don't need to. I'll just save my Tunic in case I do like a Codex thing later on, right? Like Tunic's very, very powerful in the deck, so I save it. But post-transcend, I'm going to use that Tunic for the Scale Peeler. That's like the simplest way to get around their fridge block 7, because like it's a win-win, right? If Scale Peeler has piercing, so if they want to block the Scale Peeler, they give you a card in which you've taken a card from them, or just kind of you're looking to do that, or they put a 2-block armor in front of it, in which case only a 5-block left for your CNC anyway, so they give you a card there anyway. So yeah, just Scale Peeler is an absolute house. Sometimes as easy as that. The best one is Siren's Call. One of my Zen opponents, it was during the PTI event, I think it was, I don't remember which round 5 or 6. I managed to successfully bait my opponent into blocking with their fridge, just so that I didn't start with Scale Peeler, for example, which I guess now that I'm saying this, Zens, if you see me or see news not start with Scale Peeler and just send an attack that's very tempting for your fridge block 7, you should probably figure out there's something up. So I just send a weakest link at my opponent, and then he blocks 7. And I Siren's Call the Chi out of his hand, and it's almost just game over at that point. Unless they have a way to transcend in that hand a different way. But if not, they just block Traverse and then get anything from it. And then now they just don't have to transcend, right? And that hand in particular, he needed that to like tutor like a starter, I think, or something like this. So that's the best answer you can have for when they fridge block 7. Another possible answer is Hiss, right? So you can send a disruptive piece at first, like say Leave No Witnesses, or you can even like threaten a bonds, I guess, if you did have the Hiss, or Prognosis. Surgical. Surgical's the best one, to be honest. You start with that, and then if you have the Hiss, you can Hiss into something else. So if they fridge block 7 on your Surgical, you Leave No Witnesses, you still Hiss into like say a Codex, or another 2 cost, right? The cost curve works out perfectly there, where you Leave No Witnesses, pitch a blue to Hiss, and you can still CNC afterwards, or send a Surgical or Codex into a CNC, something like that. So these are the ways you can sort of play around them fridge blocking 7, and you have to make sure you're doing that once they have transcended. And yeah, we do play differently based on whether it's pre or post red send.
Any other tips you would say for people who are struggling with Zen?
So Sensor is very, very strong, but you have to know what card to call, right? So you kind of have to know the tells. So if they block with the boots, you can totally expect Art of War. So if they block with the boots and somehow your Sensor still hits, I mean, if they block with boots, let's say they block 5 and my Sensor, suppose I didn't scale Peeler for some reason, they block 5 exactly in the Sensor, I would definitely just pop a Rousing Wave there and call Art of War if you know they're holding the Tiger. Other than that, I mean, with this card, you need to pay attention to what sort of list they're running. If you see yellow Bonds and yellow Descendants, you can pretty much be very safe just calling Descendant every time this hits. If you don't see that, then you need to be sort of keeping track of how many of those cards you have seen, like how many is in graveyard, how many you've seen them pitched, because there's a reasonable amount of times you rather call Crouching Tiger if you know they have Chase the Tails and stuff in there, which if they aren't on yellow Descendants and yellow Bonds, very good chance they are on Chase the Tails. And you know, Chase the Tail is this Bonds level of damage, right? It's a 1 for 7, which is kind of like Bonds basically. So if they get Chase the Tail off, you are trying to stop Chase the Tail as much as you're trying to stop Bonds, and you kind of need to read it with Sensor. Another thing, I guess a lot of people should have realized by now, but I'm just gonna say it: you can Siren's Call a Sensor, which is absolutely insane because you see the hand, and then you can just pick the card. You just look at the hand, and you'll know which one's the card they have to play, and then you just call that one with a Sensor. And then that sort of thing snowballs. So they couldn't play that. Now they need to arsenal it. Now you know what's in the arsenal. So your future Sensors, you can still just call that, or you know how important it is to blow that arsenal up with something like Leave No Witnesses or CNC, and that can just it sort of snowballs down. So I guess to summarize that part of it is, make sure you're holding on to the information that you have. You get a lot of incidental information as new, especially against something like Zen, where they don't block your Persuasives, they don't block your Surgicals, and of course Siren's Call is still a card. So they don't block those cards, you're seeing the hand, keep track of their arsenals, keep track of what they're pitching. You need to use every piece of information that's available to you, and then that's just exacerbated by the fact that you also run Sensor.
I'm assuming a lot of people who would include Sensor in their list for Zen would probably name Crouching Tiger. Do you ever do that or no?
Most of the time, this past weekend, I was calling Descendant Gustwave. But that's because I was facing a lot of lists that won that. Oh, I guess against Brody, this hit I called Descendant, but that was because I already saw 2 Chase the Tails. And that's what I mean by keeping track of the Banish and Graveyard. I saw Chase the Tail in his Banish and Chase the Tail in his Graveyard. So Descendant was just made more sense as a more likely thing he could do. So I called that instead of Chase the Tail. And I think that was pretty relevant because if I remember correctly, his turn wasn't too good after that. So yeah.
Would you
most of the time I was calling Descendant this past weekend. Sorry.
Would you ever call Crouching Tiger or no?
Yes. Okay. Yeah, for sure. Like I think if I had seen, for example, like 3 Descendants in his graveyard, especially I've seen more reds, right? I've seen like actually, yeah, I think I remember one of the other games. It might have been my rematch against the Battle Hardened finalist the previous day when I played him again in the Swiss of the PQ Plus. I think I saw that he had 2 red Bonds in his Banish and 2 red Descendants in his graveyard. So I was like, that's 4 of the red cards. And if he wants to, and I know he wasn't running yellows, right? So if he wants to do a blue Descendant, blue Bonds line, I'm actually pretty okay with that. That's fine. But I don't want him to do a Chase the Tail line into me. So in that case, I would call Crouching Tiger.
Okay.
So yeah, it's so you have to keep track of all those kind of things.
Anything else on Zen, or should we move on to something else?
Yeah. So his is awesome. It's like I said, the post Transcend game plan. You need an answer for the first block 7, and kind of the best way is double disruption, like a double disruption turn, which is what his lets you do. Yeah, so this card's really good. I would take damage to go ahead and resolve this. And then I guess there's stuff about his, which you can talk about later, just a lot of general stuff like arsenaling the Slither, stuff like that, which can also help towards the double disruptive kind of stuff. So
for sure.
Card is very.
Can we cover new? Because a lot of people are asking about what you're supposed to do in the mirror. So
yeah, so in the mirror, so I think I faced 3 mirrors over the weekend, 2 or 3. Numbers. You want good numbers. E-Strike is your best card. It's weird to say this, but I think E-Strike is the best, or at least one of the best cards in the mirror. Because it is very resistant to disruption, right? Like when I silence call someone, the last thing I want to see is an E-Strike. What I want to see is 3 other reds, and I take the only blue. But if one of those reds is an E-Strike, my whole thing of trying to reduce the damage to be worse than mine, which, you know, we spoke about how new sucks. Why new sucks is that they no block my entire hand, and I've dealt them 6 damage. Is kind of part of the reason why new sucks. So E-Strike is one of those cards where, okay, I've taken your hand, but you've still dealt more damage to me because you just went 2 cards sudden. This card is very, very good in the mirror because you are just trying to beat, like, you are trying to beat them on numbers. And the way the mirror works is you sort of, one player will get the tempo for a bit, for a few turn cycles, and then they will whiff on a disruption, and the other person can take back over and then have tempo for a couple of turns, and kind of just goes back and forth like that. So the other tip I would say is know when it's your turn to pivot into being the one on the front foot, and know when, you know, you don't have a good enough hand. So you should, you know, just fold it and block a little more and conserve your life so that when it is your turn again, you have the life to come back into it. Another thing is obviously be very aware of how you're blocking things. For example, in my new mirror in the quarterfinals of the PQ Plus, the first Bonds of Agony my opponent sent on me, I was holding a CNC and a Surgical Extraction in my hand, and I hadn't seen a CNC. The only other CNC I'd seen so far was the one in my Banish already. They hit it off the top. There's only one CNC left in my deck, and I need one of them in my graveyard because of Codex reasons, right? So my play there, and obviously I don't give them 3 Surgicals in my Banish either. So my play there was block 9 with CNC Surgical and on the card, because at no cost can I let this Bonds of Agony hit me and they get either 3 Surgicals in my Banish or all of my CNCs in my Banish. And then I don't have a good Codex target later on in the game. So you block 9 there. But in the second Bonds of Agony, it is sending me a few turns later. I think like 5 or 6 turns later. The new mirror goes very long. That one I just let hit because I'm holding an E-Strike and like 2 Transcend cards. And I don't really care if they take all my E-Strikes from my deck. I mean, okay, I know I just said E-Strike's very strong, but it was late enough in the game where I was like, it's fine. And also just based on the hand, they were supposed to take a Transcend card anyway. So I was like, okay, so they'll take the Transcend card and that's totally fine. So basically just don't be too scared. Like just know when the disruption is not going to affect you too much. And you know, so that's a moment of spotting when I'm supposed to pivot and I'm supposed to be the one disrupting now. Because the Bonds of Agony isn't actually too relevant right now. So be aware of that and be aware of like what you're putting in your own Banish by the cards you're blocking with.
Anything else, or are you good to jump into some of the other heroes?
I guess I enjoy the new mirror a lot. I think I see a lot of comments, people saying it's like very cursed or like very snowbally. I don't think so. I think all my new mirrors went to second cycle easily, and the one in the semifinals of the Battle Hardened went to third cycle because it died with one of us holding, you know, both of us holding 2 to 3 chi. I think it's very skill expressive. It's long and it's also exciting. It's not like the Garden type where you're just sending hammer at each other. The texture of the game does change and it does feel exciting because the first half of the game, you know, you're kind of like vying for who's holding the tempo, and later on you're starting to play cards from the other person's Banish because you're running out of gas, you don't have that much good cards anymore. It becomes a lot about like the graveyard and the Banish management and stuff. And of course in the middle is also a lot of just playing good numbers as much as you can. So it is very, very skill expressive. And as far as mirrors go in Flesh and Blood, this to me is right up there with like the Wizard mirror, like the Icelander mirror. I don't know too much about Kano mirror, but yeah, it's right there with the Icelander mirror.
How often do you like use your hero ability in the matchup? Like, are you like trying to ever like pass over something from their graveyard to play against them?
Yes, Passover is massive in the mirrors. In my semifinals of the first day, my opponent managed to play 2 Passovers because they hit my Passover off the top, and then they obviously had their own Passover as well, and it was absolutely brutal. Passover is really good. To answer the question, like how often you're using the ability, I would say there's maybe the first half to 3/4 of the game I'm activating Mask more than my ability. But once we get closer to second cycle or towards the end of that, once a Banish has good cards in there, then I'll activate ability over the mask. So particularly if you sort of get incidental good hits into the banish zone. So like a surge, maybe like one surgical or two surgicals, and once that happens, then obviously I'd rather play their surgical than activate mask because it's just better. Surgical is they have to block 4, whereas mask is give me 1 card. So it's dependent on the banish and stuff. But yeah, typically how it goes is the first half to 3/4 of the game I'm activating mask, and then the rest of it I'm activating new. And once I'm in that sort of play pattern, I'm actually very okay just blocking the mask at that point. And that definitely did happen as well.
We could go through everything, but it may take some time. Is there anything that's more relevant that you want to talk about from these right here?
I guess let's go over Kayo, I guess.
Sure, yeah.
That'd be like a different one. So we went over Zen and Azalea are pretty similar in terms of like what I'm trying to do, which is like max disruption, hold cards aggressively, and just try and keep them on small hands. And then New Mirror is also very different. And then Kayo and Victor are in that similar camp of you have to be patient, which is hard against Kayo. And I do think Kayo is slightly favored in this matchup because you can try and be patient against them, but they're 2-card hands. They out mid-range you, and they also have flashbacks, so it's pretty tough. So I'll talk about the equipment over here. This is where we play. Oh, right. I guess we didn't talk about equipments into the aggro matchups. So in the matchups where they're not blocking you, like the Zen and Azalea, we are on Blackteks because you sort of just oops into silver a lot of the time in the matchup because they just don't block anything, right? So your leave no misses hitting, your surgicals are hitting, and you just kind of accidentally get silver, so you can just buy it back. But one very, very key thing that Blacktech lets you do is just with Tunic, you can play Bonds of Agony and have it be live with just Tunic. Which is very, very strong towards the end game where you're sort of both of you are forced to block and play small hands. The fact that you can just play Bonds of Agony and all you have is Tunic and arms and your boots up and Blacktech up means they have to block 5. Otherwise, you'll just do the Tunic, play the arms, use the arms, there's 2 reactions, and use Blacktech, and that's the 3rd. And then you will deal 5 and take a card of your choice from the hand. So they have to block 5, and the best part about that is you don't even need to use the equipment once they have blocked 5. So that's that plus the fact that you're just accidentally getting silver in these matchups has put Blacktech over the common boots in this matchup for me. So then now going back to Kayo, I used to be on Blacktech in the Kayo, and it was working fine when New first came out, and a lot of Kayos thought that the best way to win was just to Oonga Boonga try and just survive the disruption and just have big blood rushes. Well, now they realize the best way to win is kind of like how New wants to win the mirror, which is just play efficient hands. And KO has extremely efficient hands, right? Like swing big for 9 and all that. Like I just can't beat those numbers. So now that they've shifted to playing towards that kind of style, I changed their equipment away from Blacktech because they are happier to block into the Stilettos flick knives. So we try and do like the Guardian thing where I get 2 to 3 of basically the 5 powers into the banish, and then I get to do like an end game of like 15 damage because I played 3 of the blue attacks in a row. So yeah, that would be the KO. The KO and the Victor this is the equipment loadout, Stilettos plus flick knives.
And for someone who maybe is just not learning about the Mistblade interaction, so you're saying you're gonna like flick the Mistblade to give their card go again that you're gonna play from banish, and then give it go again with the boots.
Yeah. So how you have to do it is once you play their first attack that doesn't have go again, you use Stilettos to give this attack go again. But on that same reaction step, you need to flick knives here to flick the blue dagger so that the next attack you play from their banish gets go again. Because once a Mistblade hits, Mistblade says the next blue attack you play gets +1 and go again. So you've given the current one go again with Stilettos, and the next one you play gets go again because your Mistblade hit because you flicked it.
And what's the second dagger you run for the matchup?
Oh, right. It's supposed to be Spider's Bite.
Okay, cool. Makes sense.
Yeah, whoops. Yeah, it's supposed to be again because they are sort of shifting towards playing a little more patient and playing a little more. They are sort of a little bit happier to block. So, So we want Spider's Bite.
And so you're playing this matchup a lot more grindy now.
Well, they are playing a lot more grindy, and I had to adapt because they are doing it that way. Because I think they realize that if they just try Oonga Boonga, they sort of get blown out a lot of the times. A lot of times just hitting blood rushes I'm sniping blood rushes from the hand, or sniping the blue with the Siren's Call so they can't blood rush, or blowing up the blood rush in the arsenal. So honestly, that a lot of times I've lost against Kayo where they just play patient and they don't just try and tunnel in the Blood Rush, and they just go for the lines I was talking about earlier, which is Wild Ride Claw into a 2-cost. Just keep doing those kind of lines and I lose. They don't need to resolve a Blood Rush. So they start pivoting to playing that kind of style, and therefore I had to pivot into playing like this, where now they pivot into that. So matchup goes a bit longer, which means I can set up the banish. That happened to me so many times before, where I was playing the Blackteks loadout, but they were playing grindy into me. So I was like, wait, I have all these awesome stuff in your banish. Like, you've got 2 windups in there and a Smash Instinct. But I can't take advantage of it because I don't have enough go again. So I was like, okay, let me switch to this, 2 Stilettos and Flick Knives. Also, I'm not getting silver enough because they are blocking and stopping my silver. So
what are you doing for Enigma?
Yeah, as much go game as possible. So 5 hisses. Because... Okay, this matchup is unfavored. Okay, straight up. I'm not going to be like, oh, 5 hisses and then you win every time. Like, heck no. But the way... The way to help your chances is to have as few turns as possible, where the way you go wide is by swinging dagger into dagger. That is how, like, that just sort of seals your fate. If a lot of times you are going wide or the most damage you can do is dagger into dagger, that is terrible. Which is why I went 5 hiss, because we want to go again with real attacks as much as possible. So it's all just about raw numbers. The on-hits don't matter so much, obviously, because nothing's hitting. So it's all just raw numbers. And going as wide as you can. So we have 5 hisses for that, and then the E-strikes and looking for scraps as well, for going as wide as possible. Siren's Call, obviously a house. Siren's Call, very good. One interesting thing about this matchup is that a lot of Enigmas are pivoting to playing less ward heavy and more offensive blues because of Zen. And that's actually good for us. I see a bunch of them on second tenet of Chi Wind now, for example. And that's really good for us. So either they have to bring those cards into us to not affect their blue ratio, or they have to significantly hurt their blue ratio when they play into us by cutting levels and cutting the tenets of Chi and maybe even cutting Enigma Chimeras into us. So it's like significantly hurts their blue count, so they're gonna like probably break more and also be more vulnerable to Siren's Call. Because now they're less likely to draw a redundant blue once they've cut those blues from their list. So if you Siren's Call them, like, this is more vulnerable to it, right? You can't like send a Phantasmaclasm at you if they draw 1 blue and you Siren's Call it away. Also, because they're less ward heavy, means they're less able to pitch their blues out of their hand in response to Siren's Call. The ward heavy list can just, all right, pitch a blue, play my Waxing Spectre in response to your Siren's Call. Now Siren's Call just whiffed, but the new ones are cutting a lot of those cards, so they can't do that as effectively. So Siren's Call stonks have gone up, as well as the blues they're running now. We are happy to play. Like, previously, it was just a whole bunch of just like Warmongers and this runs on me and stuff. Whereas now it's like those Chimeras, blue Hummels even every now and then. So all these cards are happy to play. So the matchup has gotten better for us because of the way they've been changing. Still not good. But yeah, I guess those are my points for the matchup. Go again with real cards as much as you can, not your daggers. And just keep in mind that now their banish zone is starting to get a little more, it's starting to be filled up with better cards than last time.
What is Censor for? Do you just name Manifestation if they block the Traverse?
I mean, it kind of never hits. It's a 1/5. It's a 1/5 that sometimes it's really just about the numbers, So a lot, like, say the line of you dagger into Codex. Into any other deck, I'll dagger and then leave no witnesses every time. But into Enigma, I want to dagger Codex into Censor because it's extra damage, right? I guess Codex has a very interesting interaction with Censor, of course, as well, because if their arsenal was empty, and this is in general into, like, not just Enigma, into, like, generally any deck, if the arsenal was empty, you just call whatever they put back with Codex, like, if your Censor hits. So, that's a really fun interaction there. But yeah, into Enigma it's a 1/5. It was the only thing in the sideboard I wanted to bring in to fill out the 60, just because I wanted more damage.
Is Prism any different?
Oh yeah, Prism's very different. We bring D-Reacts into Prism. Erudition, and also just the 7 Power Heralds. We bring Heralds. So we bring the D-Reacts. Prism, I'd rather face a Prism than an Enigma, because they are also more vulnerable to disruption. And also they have no blocks. So, sometimes the game just goes your way where they just can't block you properly. You're taking stuff out of the hand with, like, Surgicals and Prognosis or whatever. And also against Prism, when you know whether there's going to be a second Herald or not, it is that sort of information is very, very valuable. Or you know whether they have a Wrath or not, so all that kind of stuff is very, very important. Yeah, and they should be on the Rapture plan. I've tested against Prism a few times, and from what we found is like the Vestige plan is not great into Nu because you're bringing a whole bunch of no blocks into a deck like Nu that kind of makes you block her, right? Or if you don't block her, she gets to take a pick of it's just gets to take apart your hand, right? So it should be in a Rapture plan. Yeah, it's tough. We only have 5 like fake poppers, like not even the 7 power poppers. So it's not easy, but I mean Prism is also a fair bit of a knowledge check. So just make sure you know when you could potentially get blown out by ALS. Like I said, I like to play Nu pretty aggressively. Like I want to resolve my hisses and double disrupt and stuff like that, and activate the mask and all that. But if they are drawing cards with like Soraya and stuff, you have to be aware that you are opening yourself up to them just ending their turn by playing ALS. So make sure you know those kind of things, that you don't just fall right into it unless that is your only way out, that they don't have ALS. So there's a bit of a knowledge check there. If you can pass a knowledge check, and stuff lines up for you a little. Stuff does need to line up for you. It is unfavored, but it's better than Enigma, and you can definitely get there because 32 life, and the deck does have a fair number of no blocks.
What are you doing into Kano?
Dying for the most part. Just, like I said, the good Kanos, like the top tier Kanos, there's honestly no point. It is okay with 2 Oasis. There is like I don't know, like a less than 5% chance or something. Like their hands really just don't function, and your Oasis lines up exactly, and maybe you get there. But against the top tier Kanos, honestly, you are probably just dying.
What's your default approach to the matchup? Do you play more defensively from the beginning, or do you play more aggressively from the beginning?
No, play more aggressively. That's the whole point of Oasis. The Oasis allows you to play more aggressively, right? Especially with the Tunic as well. You park an Oasis in Arsenal, and now you can you sort of expend your hand offensively. The problem is that you don't deal a lot of damage even when you expend your hand offensively. Like Nu's math, the way she makes up for her bad math is by ripping cards from your opponent, right? You sort of, against Zen, for example, my math is bad. They no block me and I dealt 7 damage. But I've made their math worse than mine in that process because I took their 2 key cards that they needed. I took their only blue or whatever. Now their turn is pitch a red for chase the tail, just a raw chase the tail. So that's obviously way worse than the math I was doing, for example. Against Kano, I don't have that because I'm doing my whole thing. I'm surgical for 7 and then empty the hand to Kano in response and then just play all the arcane. And then the math, I was supposed to make up for the math by ripping cards from the hand, but I didn't get to do that. So, yeah, it's just we still have to just play aggressively because if you just give Kano time to set up, you just die. So we have to play aggressively, and that's where the Oasis comes in. Maybe you force them to go off on a less than ideal hand, 2 or 3 reds in there. Maybe they don't have potions set up yet, and then maybe you get there. But yeah, you have to play aggressively and hope you make it. So it's also why we run in the whole go again package that we run into Enigma. All looking for scraps, all 5 hisses, the E-strikes. We just need to try and kill them, and usually we don't. Usually we just die.
But it seems like you think it's winnable, or else you probably wouldn't be sideboarding for it.
Margin and Peter was staying in my house for this event. Obviously, 2 of the best gamers in the world. And I told them that I'm siding, I'm putting these in, but it's not for them specifically because it doesn't matter how I sideboard against them, I will just die. But it's for the mid-level Kanos. The Kanos that are Kindle just came out and they're freaking out, oh my god, this is awesome. And you play against them and they have to undo their line 20 times before they can actually figure out how to play it correctly. Those kind of Kanos, it's I was there's a chance I face, someone who doesn't have 3 years of experience like the 2 of them do, who forgets that they Kanoed and then they activate Striders and then they play the Kanoed card and the Striders got used up, or they're not tracking the Kindle went where they didn't want it to go, because when you're running Kindle and Crucible and Ring Foresight and they all buff different things, they all buff in a different way, and Aether Flare and Wildfire's buff in a different way as well. A lot of Kanos don't know the minutia of all that, and I didn't want to give those Kanos the free wins. Also the Kanos that are oh, we got to stack the assassin, and then they mess up their stack because it's very difficult, especially when I am kind of still disrupting them. I don't want those Kanos to get the free wins. But if I play it against Margin or Peter, I'm pretty sure I lose at 95% of the time. So yeah, that's why that's who I'm sideboarding for.
Okay, I think we probably covered everyone. Then is there any other matchup that you feel like you need to touch on?
No, I think it's good.
Okay. I guess a question on the opposite side is, if you are a person playing against New, how would you learn how to beat this hero, basically?
I feel like it's similar to like when you asked me how to play New. It's so like, what deck are we talking about, right? Are we talking about like a Zen into New? Are we talking about like a Victor into New? Are we talking about Kayo? Like,
So
what we talk?
I guess that probably is
similar
part
to
of the
how
answer, right? Is you probably should know what kind of deck you're on and what your macro strategy is, and then know how New would want to take you off of it.
Yeah. So okay, so I guess what I can talk about. Okay, so I can start from the Zen perspective, right? So the finals of the PTI event, which I didn't quite get there, and I think my opponent played excellently and had a decent plan into it. Not decent, like the best plan I had seen was she had enough of the cards that let her play on small hands. So she sided in Blanche into me, which it sounds weird. You're a Zen, like why are you siding in Blanche into anything but Prism? But it's because there's enough times where I'm sort of ripping your hand apart. And when you just 2-card set on me, like we spoke about how E-Strike's very good in the mirror, like you can adopt some of that as Zen as well, where you play your E-Strike, she was also playing CNCs and Blanches, and you send it, you don't just overcommit into, I need to do my full 6-7 card pop-off like I do into other decks, because New a lot of times will say, no, I don't let you do that. So you sort of do like why Kayo is also very good into me, or what we do in the mirror, where you play your 2-3 card small efficient hands. That's very good. And then on top of that, I guess as Zen is also make sure that you also have the Tiger package. I don't think the Rainbow Bond. I think the Rainbow Bonds list, I don't know where it lies, like versus the like hybrid Tiger Bonds list. Like I think the Zens is still. I know some Zens won the Rainbow Bonds, some Zens won the Tiger package. I would say the one that has the hybrid, that has both, is better into me because of Sensor, right? If you're running Rainbow Bonds, I just call Descendant every time and is always very good. But we are running the hybrid package, and I don't have the hand information that I would like. I need to guess, and sometimes I guess wrong. Or sometimes you have hands that can do both. I was definitely a hand ahead against my opponent here in the finals, where I called Descendant, and then she played out this full like Tiger line with Sacred Art. And I was like, oh man, I should have called Tiger. But I looked at her pitch zone and the cards on the chain, and I was like, oh, if I call Tiger, she can go do the whole Descendant line because she had blue Descendant in the pitch zone. So I was just like, there was no correct answer. There was no correct call for me there, because she would have done. She was open to do either one because of the way the list is built, right? She definitely had like not the best out of war turn because of the CNCs and Blanches. So you do, I guess when you like sometimes that will affect you, but I think overall what that Blanche does is still just way better for you than trying to overcommit to trying to play 5-card hands, because I wouldn't really let you. And Blanche is also surprisingly disruptive into New, because, like I said, right, my disruption is Mask and Hiss a lot of the times. So if I want to Hiss and do a double disruption, I need the blue in my pitch zone to make the slither in my hand. Or if I want to transcend and Mask, I need to have I need the blue. I need the colors of my cards, and Blanche doesn't let me do that. So Blanche is surprisingly disruptive, and also comes at a break point, and I don't have a lot of armor. So stuff like that. It's a little similar to Icelander, where it's Icelander's making frostbites for everyone, but if you give Icelander a frostbite, she's really sad. It's kind of similar where it's like, oh, when the Zen disrupts, I'm trying to disrupt the heck out of the Zen, but when Zen disrupts me, I'm actually kind of sad because I need to keep a lot in my hand to disrupt them through the 7-block fridge. So if you have cards like the CNCs and the Blanches to punish me for that, that's the sort of line you should go towards. Another thing that my opponent did, which is very, very good, is space out when you're blocking with your equipment. So she blocked with the boots on one turn and blocked with Traverse on a different turn. So instead of committing to one 6-card turn, just recognize that you don't need that 140 damage pop-off into New. Just have like 2 20 damage ones, and that's totally fine. We'll still win the game with that. So, but what it does is insulate you from, if I do manage to disrupt you past your Traverse block or past your boots block, you still have the other one for the following turn. You make me need to have the disruption again and again because you're not going all in into one turn cycle. Is kind of the way I would put it on a macro way, how to approach the New matchup as Zen.
So I don't know if this would be a perfect example, but it sounds somewhat similar to Dawnblade Dory, where when they have 4 cards, it's a lot more difficult to block and stay on your game plan, versus if you can rip cards from them, the choices become a lot easier for you.
Yeah, and like what I was saying earlier, especially once the Zen has transcended, I cannot just CNC you. If my turn is just CNC, I die because you just block 7 in the fridge and pop off with 6 cards, and you know there's nothing I can do about it. So which is why you keep cards. So if you send some disruption at me and don't let me do that, I would need to either eat that CNC, eat the disruption, or my turn just like pass. Or if I have tuning up, then I can scale P the CNC. But a lot of times, if you take the cards from me, I can't disrupt you the way I need to because of your 7-block fridge.
The first one is, after talking about this for an hour, do you still think that the deck sucks?
Okay, well, I didn't think the deck was terrible to begin with, otherwise I wouldn't have played it. It's just a joke because of how I'll be like, oh, I've ripped my opponent's entire hand, I have full tempo, and I rip the hand again, and I look at life totals, and I'm like, I've dealt you 10 damage over the past 2 turns of you no blocking me and doing nothing back. Like, that's the part where I'm like, okay, this deck sucks. But of course, I mean, that's obviously not counting the fact that they didn't get to do anything those 2 turns. So it's like the math of the deck is very weird and very different. A lot of the math is implicit in what you're presenting. Is implicit in they can't block my surgical, just because of everything that could possibly be. So I get my on hits. So a lot of the math is in those on hits, right? Is in the math of I took a card from your hand of my choice. My CNC blew up your arsenal. My Leave No Witnesses blew up your arsenal. On top of the very implicit math of I know what you have, and I don't know how to quantify that, but there is some quantity there, because that makes me able to plan out my blocks very, very well. I'll also plan out how important it is that I send critical disruption at your arsenal, right? So for example, against Brody, at some point I knew he had an Art of War in his arsenal, and then that changes how I play. That means I know I need to commit super hard to my arsenal disruption for the following turns, and that sort of and I know he needs to commit hard to defend it as well. And there's just this value there which I don't know how to quantify, on top of just value of like sensor, right? Like I know what you have, aside from just knowing how to block or knowing how much I need to pressure you. I also have a card that lets me specifically say you can't play this card. So, there's implicit value in all those things I don't know to quantify. The actual numbers are bad, and that's why we say the deck sucks. But there's implicit value in all these things, and that's what makes it exciting. And no, I don't think the deck sucks, I guess, to be fully clear. She does very, very strong things. She makes it very hard for an opponent to play around those things. Also, heads up, Snag is not as good a card as you think it is. Again, like I said, Anu playing well should not be tunneling on Bonds of Agony, and Snag is best against Bonds of Agony. A lot of times my turn is like Blue Dagger into like Prognosis will go again into like a CNC or something like this. And your Snag just doesn't do anything. In the finals of my PTI of the PTI event, my CNC actually just blew up my opponent's Snag in the arsenal, because it just there wasn't a turn cycle where it really mattered. Especially when like it's like Leave No Witnesses, right? Like sure, I'm doing Leave No Witnesses and my plan is to hiss it and then do something else. You can snag the damage from the hiss, but you still need to block 4 on the Leave No Witnesses to protect your arsenal. So once you block 4 on the Leave No Witnesses, your snag was just a D-react, which is like fine. Like I'm happy if a Zen wants to run D-reacts into me, like yeah, please do. So Stag isn't that good a card. And I forgot why I went on the Stag tangent. Sorry, what were we talking about?
Whether or not she's a good deck.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, no. So yeah, she does powerful. She makes it very hard for opponents to play around her. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Makes it very hard for opponents to play around her. Something like Stag isn't as good as you think it is. Another thing is there's just a lot of agency, right? So I like decks, like my preference for decks where the median turn cycle is like 10 turns. I want a deck that wins or loses in like 10 turns. So like Iyslander was one before this. Previous meta was Kasai. And during those 10 turns, a lot of interaction points between me and my opponent. So, like Iyslander and Kasai were like those kind of heroes in the previous metas that had that sort of median 10-turn game, and a lot of interaction. So Nu is that in this meta, in my opinion. So if you're the type of person that likes that, then this is the deck for you. Also, the mirror is, like I said, skill expressive and fun and very, very. It's more than just tolerable. It's just it's a good mirror, and that matters to me too, because I don't want to play Zen mirrors. I don't play Zen or Azalea mirrors. And I just hate Guardian. I know Guardian mirrors are skill expressive, but I just hate it. I just hate Guardian as a class, as in playing it. Not that it exists. It's fine. Class is fine.
It is pretty
I just don't like playing it. So yeah, as far as mirrors go, if you want a deck that has a good mirror, that has a median 10-turn game, lots of interaction, this is the deck, and I think she's a strong spot into the current expected winners meta game as well, right? You expect to see a lot of Zen. She's very strong there. She has game into Azalea. I would say Azalea's like 50-50. Some people to pick on Zen are bringing Victor, and you have a very, very good Victor matchup. Enigmas need to be sort of scared in a corner because of Zen, so they're not showing up as much. So I think she's well positioned, particularly in the winners meta game where you're facing a lot of Zen. And she does strong things.
Okay. Dylan wants to know, Subway or Chipotle?
Okay, that's very mean because I love both those places. So, like, what the heck, Dylan? I guess if I had to pick, the one I tend to eat more often is Subway. But I mean, why would you make me choose? I like both of them. They're both awesome.
A final question I got is, what are in your gold envelopes?
Oh, right. Yeah. So I do got to open them. Yes, we're opening them for this stream.
I want to know what's in them. It's an important question. How do you want to do it? Do you want to just show them to me as you open them, and then you gauge my reaction? How do you want to do it?
I'll open them for the camera. I'll start with the PQ plus one. So yeah, like I said, I did get second at the PQ plus, but you know how these events normally go, right? It's like the PQ plus is so top heavy that a lot of times we agree on a price split beforehand. Not price split, price restructuring.
Yeah, we have to.
The loser gets a gold foil and the winner gets the invite. Same thing, last year when I played the PTI event, same thing, except that one, I managed to win that one. So won. Lucas Oswald walked away with the gold foil, and I got the invite. So yeah, we're gonna start with that one. It's a majestic, rare, or common. Hopefully, it's not a Coda Frost. Open it for the camera.
All right, let's see it.
Let's see. I can't even see it.
Oh no! Can you not?
No!
Oh no!
Bone Vizier.
I forgot that card existed.
Not ideal. Yeah, I was like, I didn't even recognize the art at first. I was like, wait, what is the name? All right. What even is the rarity of this? Rarity?
It was in the Dory versus Reinhardt. I want to say its rarity is classified as R. I think it's a rare.
Sure. Okay, but sure. Okay, cool.
It might as well not have a rarity at all, though. I don't think it'll ever see play.
Yeah. All right, now the legendary.
Okay.
All right, cool.
Let's see it. Ooh, that's a hit for you.
Oh, Grains. Yeah. Oh,
yes.
God, this is a good one.
They knew.
Is very, very good.
They knew.
Yep. They knew. They knew I want to play Kasai.
Will you go back to it now?
No, I think Warrior is dead in a hole. Like just dead and absolutely unplayable. But yeah, maybe at some point. I do enjoy Kasai.
That's a sweet one for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I appreciate you taking the time. If people want to find you, where can they find you? Besides, obviously, the caster booth.
I'd say Twitter and Discord. You can tweet at me, or you can send me a Discord DM or a friend request. I'm just @thicksmoke at both those places.
And you will be casting Amsterdam, correct?
I will be casting Amsterdam, yes.
All right. Well,
awesome.
Hopefully this has been helpful for everyone who has wanted to learn more about the hero. Appreciate you coming on and chatting with us.
Sure.
Until next time.
Sure. Thanks.